With Assassin's Creed Shadows quote-unquote releasing on February 14th next year, I figured now is the perfect time to make this video, especially since I've managed to grow a pretty cool audience. This video is aimed at complete beginners, or anybody who has not played any Assassin's Creed game before, but wants to dive in and doesn't know where to start. There are 13 mainline Assassin's Creed games, so it can definitely be overwhelming and confusing for new players. The direction of this franchise has changed quite a lot from narrative driven to semi-open world and then to complete RPG open world. There are also countless DLCs. In fact, I think there's around 17 or 18 give or take, so that's even more Assassin's Creed related content. There's a movie, a bunch of novels, comic books, an upcoming mobile game, and I'm sure there is a lot more out there. Since I'd like to think I know a fair bit about the series, I thought I would chime in and share my thoughts on which game I think you should start with. If you're watching this video and you already play Assassin's Creed, feel free to help those below in the comments, as well as give your own opinions and make the new players feel welcomed. Just to be clear, this is not a ranking or a list from least to best, it's simply my recommendations on where you could start from. So with that said, do consider hitting that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date on everything Assassin's Creed, and let's get into it. The first recommendation I want to talk about when it comes to which Assassin's Creed game to start with first is, in my opinion, the best written narrative in this franchise, and that is the Ezio trilogy, which consists of Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and Assassin's Creed Revelations. And this trilogy follows the journey of Ezio Auditore. I promise you, if you play Assassin's Creed 2 and finish it, you will 99% of the time play the other two games after. Now, Ezio as a character is without a doubt the most iconic character in the franchise, as well as being the literal poster boy for Assassin's Creed. A lot of people who play video games in general would most likely know about his character, just because of how well written and iconic he is. His story across these three games stand out not just in Assassin's Creed, but across gaming as a whole. So why is Ezio's story considered the best in the series, and why is it a solid entry point? Well, it all comes down to his character development. First of all, Ezio's character development is incredible. You start with him as a literal newborn to a young, immature noble at 17 years old, and over the course of the trilogy, you witness his transformation into a composed assassin mentor. This kind of character arc, where you see a character evolve over time, is pretty rare in video games, especially with the level of detail that Ubisoft back when they were good gave to Ezio. By the time you reach Assassin's Creed Revelations, you feel like you've grown with him, and that's what makes his story so compelling. There is also the incredible modern day story focusing on Desmond Miles. In these games, the modern day segments are tightly linked to the main story, with Desmond reliving Ezio's memories through a device called the Animus. The trilogy offers some of the most interesting modern day lore in the entire series, filled with mystery, betrayals and revelations, no pun intended, about the ongoing war between the modern day assassins and Templars. For many, this was the peak of the modern day storyline, but it is worth noting that later games shift focus away from Desmond's story, so starting here gives you the best experience in both the past and the present, with one of the best story setups. Now, something that might be considered controversial is, in my opinion, on the parkour. I personally believe that the Ezio trilogy has the best parkour in the series. The fluidity, the sense of momentum, and the freedom to scale things in these games just feels right to me. However, I know this opinion is not shared by everybody. Many people believe that Assassin's Creed Unity, which released in 2014 I think, has the best parkour, because it's quote-unquote more advanced and it has flashier animations. While I understand that argument, I still prefer the simplicity and responsiveness of the Ezio trilogy's parkour. But back to the narrative. There is a potential downside if you choose to start with these games, and that downside is they set the bar really high. The writing, the character development, and storytelling in these games are top tier, and while the series has had other strong games, the writing in many of the later games does not quite hit the same level. That's not to say the other games are not great, they absolutely are, but if you start with the Ezio trilogy, you might find yourself comparing every other game after it to it, and very few will measure up to that level of story. Oh, and also, if you decide to start with the Ezio trilogy, this could create a challenge for you when it comes to gameplay expectations. The early games in the series, such as the Ezio trilogy, are more grounded in classic Assassin's Creed mechanics, stealth, parkour and combat. Later games like Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey move more towards an open world RPG style. So if you love the Ezio trilogy's traditional approach, the newer entries might feel like a completely different experience. But yeah, regardless of the bar being set high with this trilogy, I still recommend starting with it as it's a perfect entry point. Another very good entry point to start with is Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which is in my opinion the most unique game in the series. This game does something that no other entry in the franchise has done, which is combine the traditional Assassin versus Templar conflict with an incredible pirate adventure. It's not a standard Assassin's Creed game, it's one of the best pirate games ever made, hands down. In fact, can you really name me another single player pirate story game out there? Actually, well, there is the new Yakuza pirate game coming out next year, so yeah, I just ate my own words. Anyway, so why is Black Flag such a good entry point for newcomers? Well, first off, it gives you that fresh take on the series while still keeping the core elements intact. You play as Edward Kenway, a pirate who gets drawn into the world of the Assassins and the Templars. The beauty of this game is that it perfectly balances both sides of the narrative. On one hand, you have the classic Assassins vs Templar storyline, which is full of, conflict, betrayal and conspiracies, and on the other hand, you're quite literally living the life and experiencing the life of a pirate sailing the Caribbean, plundering ships and exploring islands. The pirate theme gives the game a sense of freedom and adventure that makes it stand out from the rest of the earlier games in the series. The naval combat in Black Flag is another thing that sets it apart. No other Assassin's Creed game lets you fully control a ship and take part in sea battles the way Black Flag does. Yes, there is other Assassin's Creed games that let you control a ship and take part in naval combat, but nowhere near the level of Black Flag's naval combat. The open world nature of the game means you can sail wherever you want, which gives you that exploration and kind of open world discovery that's rare in the series before 2017. Speaking of being the best pirate game, it's pretty hard to argue that any other pirate themed game has come close to what Black Flag has achieved. The world feels alive, filled with treasure hunts, naval combat, and an incredible pirate themed story. Speaking of the story, Black Flag has what I like to call the second best storyline in the series, right after the Ezio trilogy. Edward Kenway's journey from a selfish pirate to somebody that's caught up in the Assassins vs Templar struggle is very well written. The game does such an excellent job of showing Edward's growth, and by the end his character arc feels satisfying and earned. One of the game's standout features is its side characters. You're not just playing alone. Edward is joined by a memorable cast of characters like Blackbeard, Charles Vane, Mary Read and so many more, which by the way are all based on real historical pirates. These side characters are, in my opinion, the best in the entire Assassin's Creed series. They each have their own motivations, their personalities and character arcs that add quite a fair amount of depth to the game's story. However, there is one downside to jumping into Black Flag right now, and that's the fact that a remake is coming in late 2025. Ubisoft is working on bringing Black Flag back with updated visuals and possibly some new features, so you could choose to wait for that remake. If you're someone who values playing the most up-to-date versions of a game, it might be worth holding off. But honestly, even in its current state, Assassin's Creed Black Flag is an amazing experience that holds up very well. Okay, now a recommendation that is not the Ezio trilogy or Black Flag is Assassin's Creed Origins, which compared to the other games I talked about at the start is the start of something different. Now straight off the bat, Origins is by far the most user-friendly and beginner-friendly game out of the more recent Assassin's Creed games. I would recommend the entire current RPG trilogy, which is Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla, but it is very hit and miss. And to be honest, if you play Valhalla, you might get sick of the series by then. I know I did for about a year. However, Origins is a game out of those three that is just a straight up hit. Now personally, Assassin's Creed Origins has the best setting in the entire franchise, even though Odyssey and Unity come close. But when you consider everything from the story to the protagonist to the less bloated side content, Origins edges out as the better experience overall. Origins takes place in ancient Egypt, which is one of the most fascinating and stunning locations you could explore in any game. One thing about Ubisoft that they often never get wrong, no matter what you think about them, is world recreation. Everything in Origins' world is stunning and so detailed, from the large desert, the diverse cities, the landmarks. Its attention to detail is remarkable. Now, while many people may recommend Assassin's Creed Odyssey as a solid entry point over Origins, I feel like Assassin's Creed Origins has more depth to it. Another reason I think Origins has the best game world is because how well it ties into the story. The game follows Bayek of Siwa, who is one of the best protagonists in the series, alongside the two I already talked about being Ezio and Edward. Funnily enough, that is my top 3. Bayek is a Magi, a protector of Egypt, and his personal story for justice is deeply connected to the world around him. Also, it's not like the story of Origins is bad. It's honestly a top 3. Bayek's entire narrative is pretty emotional and memorable, and the game does such a good job blending his personal story with the larger conflict between the Order of the Ancients, which is basically the precursor to the Assassins vs Templars. Oh, and that reminds me, this game is important for the lore if you care about the Assassins and Templars, as it contains a big revelation that I will not spoil. Of course, Origins isn't just about the main story. The game is packed with side content that is not bloated or filler, and it helps flesh out the world even more. There's boss fights against literal Egyptian gods, Valakis hunting you down in the world to take out, memorable side quests, and a bunch of other things that I would consider less bloated and filler compared to Odyssey. Now, one of the biggest reasons I think Origins is the best game world and is a solid entry point is because it's the first real open world in the series. Before Origins, the games were more linear, with smaller, more condensed environments. Syndicate and Unity were smaller scaled open worlds, but those games had pretty mediocre stories and protagonists. Origins changed all of that by introducing a huge open world RPG format that has become the standard for the series now. If you're looking to understand what the current Assassin's Creed games are like, Origins is a great starting point because it sets the foundation for the modern open world RPG style. So by the time you get to playing Shadows, you'll have a pretty good understanding of what to expect. Now that I've gone over the games that I think are considered pretty good entry points, I want to also go over a different approach on how to play the games. Well, to be fair, this is a standard approach, and honestly, it's the most normal way to go about it, and that is just playing the games in release order. So starting with the original Assassin's Creed from 2007 and working your way up to the latest game being Mirage. This approach has a lot of benefits, especially if you want to experience the franchise the way it was originally designed, and see how the series has evolved over time. Starting with the first Assassin's Creed, you'll be introduced to the core mechanics and the main conflict between the Assassins and Templars. The first game sets the foundation for everything that comes after, and is more so a blueprint that Ubisoft experimented with. From there you can move on to Assassin's Creed 2 and follow the Ezio trilogy, which I've already talked about. As you continue through the series, you'll see how each game builds on the last, introducing new mechanics, features and storytelling. For example, after the Ezio trilogy, you'll jump into Assassin's Creed 3, which introduces a new protagonist and a completely different setting. From there, Assassin's Creed Black Flag changes things up with its pirate theme and naval combat, giving the series a fresh twist. This is what makes playing in release order so interesting. You'll get to see how the series constantly reinvents itself. Then after Assassin's Creed Black Flag, there's Assassin's Creed Rogue, which funnily enough is a game that focuses on a Templar perspective instead of an assassin, so that's pretty unique. Then there is Unity and Syndicate, which are similar in certain ways. This is where the series started to go next generation to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, so the graphical improvement is very noticeable. Oh yeah, and I also need to mention that a good thing about playing it in release order is you'll follow the modern day storyline as it was intended. The modern day narrative runs through most of the games, and starting from the first game allows you to fully understand the overarching plot. Characters like Desmond Miles and the ongoing war between the modern day Assassins and Templars, which are Abstergo, become more meaningful if you've been with the story from the beginning. Another big advantage of playing in release order is that you'll get a sense of how the series' gameplay has evolved. Early on, the games are more focused on stealth, parkour and city-based exploration, but as you get to the later titles like Origins and Odyssey, the series transforms into a more open-world RPG style, with large maps, dialogue choices and character progression. That said, one potential downside is that some of the older games like the original Assassin's Creed might feel a bit dated compared to the newer games. The gameplay and visuals have advanced a lot since 2007, so the first few games might feel more limited in scope. So yeah, if you're a fan of seeing how games evolve, this is an excellent approach to starting your Assassin's Creed experience. And there we have it. That is my opinion on the best ways to start playing Assassin's Creed. Either the Ezio trilogy for the best narrative and protagonist, Black Flag for just being the most unique and interesting, Origins for being the best newest style Assassin's Creed game as well as having a very stunning world, or if you want to be normal, just play it in release order from Assassin's Creed 1 to Mirage, so that way you'll have the most knowledge and experience with the franchise. Comment below if you have any issues or need any help, and there should be plenty of people down below to help you. I'll also be replying to comments as well. As always, shout out to the members of my Patreon, and with that said, I'll see you in the next one.